Okay, welcome everyone to the Thursday, May 1st, 2025 special meeting of the Sunset Beach Planning Board. Let's stand for Pledge Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yes, I'll officially call a meeting to order. We have a quorum, though we're not voting on anything today. Do we need, Lisa, the conflicts of interest statement, since we're not voting on anything today?
No, you don't.
Okay. So the only item on our agenda today is just a discussion to plan the planning of the comprehensive plan, land use plan. So this is like before the first step. Lisa?
And I could just start. Just wanted to thank the planning board for your initiative to get this process started, and Wes and Ron for being with us today. The town council has included in the budget, as we sit now, with the money, the funds to redo the land use plan. We will go to ask for a public hearing during the May 5th meeting and looking for adoption at the June 2nd meeting of the budget. And once we get there, then we would be able to establish a calendar for you all to meet, if you would not want to do that during your regular meeting schedule. Kimberly has so graciously taken all of the town plans and put them in a notebook for you. That includes the Sunset Beach bicycle and pedestrian plan, the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We also have a vision plan, which was instrumental in the development of the Gateway Corridor ordinances that we have in the UDO currently. And Wes will be able to speak to that, as he was instrumental in getting that project completed.
Yes.
That project was initiated by the town council. However, it was not adopted. It was converted into the UDO Gateway District ordinance that you have now. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you, unless you have any questions for me.
Am I on now? Thanks. I have a quick question. In terms of the budgeting, one of the aspects of the land use plan from 2017 that I thought was particularly helpful was the public survey. That cost money. Is that budgeted in the current plan? Because I think we got some real guidance there in terms of the general consensus. And that would be very helpful in terms of the process.
Yes, the budget includes, I'm sure, a survey, community meetings, and other types of methods of getting public input.
Okay. Now, my recollection from the land use plan, there was one public meeting, and quote unquote in the land use plan, it says that the attendance to that was quote unquote sparse. So is it possible that we have budget to make sure that the public is aware of their opportunity to participate, and perhaps we should have more than just one public meeting? And is that something that can be, make sure that we get it in the budget so we don't wake up and go, oh, wait a minute, we can't do more than one?
The budget includes all of that already.
Okay.
And as with the master park plan, the Parks and Recreation plan, we not only had a community meeting in this building, but we had committees that went to the park, the beach, and to other events like the markets, the concerts, and gathered public input through those means as well.
Okay.
So it's really the planning board is the driver of how many community meeting events you want to have, what type, what forum. It's a clean slate of how you all want to start.
I just want to make sure that
and the money's there.
Nothing early on, the budget includes all that. So that's great. And then the second thing is, I know we have some guests here. There's nothing in the agenda that allows for public comments. Is that something that I can move to include?
That's at the pleasure of the board.
Yeah,
It doesn't.
So I move that we allow for public comments based upon the protocol that exists for other planning board meetings, 3 minutes, no dialogue. And we can either do that at,
Someone want to
at
second
your
that?
leisure, at your pleasure.
Second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
So we'll include a public comment period. But I guess, first of all, well, I think I'd like to have discussion first, I guess, or at least initial part of it was, I think the original idea of kicking off this meeting, which is obviously, some may say slightly premature because it hasn't been technically a budget approved and scoping letters and all that stuff done, but I'm sure it seems to be in the work, was the original discussion we had was, I guess, expanding what we had originally in this book, a land use plan, to be more comprehensive, to do more forward-looking planning, a more holistic type planning, sort of a Sunset Beach 2040 plan or whatever. So I think that the first topic of discussion is maybe between Lisa and the town and Wes, and then Ron and us is, I guess, the overall scope. Are we limiting it to the minimum requirements of what a land use plan should be? Or are we open to planning on expanding it to, Stuart, I think, was the one that came up with, in making it this plus more holistic or comprehensive as a 10-year plan, or I don't know, 2040, whatever you want to pick as the date.
Mr. Chair, if I may, and Alan, is this on?
Doesn't sound like it.
Is it on?
Yeah.
I have so to your point, I've got just a quick couple brief slides just to lay the groundwork about what a land use plan is. Then we can, and then we'll move into just getting feedback from everybody so we can have an open discussion about what your goals are for this plan, the things you want to see, et cetera, what the public engagement process is. And if you're fine, I can go stand up there and we can go through that short presentation if you're okay with that, Mr. Chair.
Perfect.
Okay.
And if I can just preface this, I mean, the purpose of what we're going to do today is not to make any decisions about what the land use plan is, but rather to set forward how we're going to do this. Is that a fair assessment of what we're trying to try and accomplish
Well,
today?
Yeah.
A little bit on breadth. Where I'm going to is breadth, first of all,
Right.
Yeah.
to
That's-
make sure the
that's good.
breadth, so the breadth of what we're planning on doing fits with what the town wants to do.
Or in concert.
It's certainly in the budget, et cetera. So take it away, Wes. Is there a clicker he needs up there?
Yeah. And I could sit up there, but I think it's easier for everybody to see me from here. Okay, so let's just go through. I just want to talk briefly about like what is a land use plan. You guys may already know that, and so forgive me for going through it, but I think it would be helpful, right, to at least understand.
Yeah, Kevin's new, so.
Okay.
Good
And
morning.
Kevin, very nice to meet you. My name is
Wes.
my name is Wes McLeod. I'm with Cape Fear Council of Governments. I've had the pleasure of working with the town on a number of projects over the years, and have gotten to know the rest of these folks. So welcome and pleasure to meet you. So similar to your document now, it is an official document containing goals, policies, analyses, and maps that serves as a community's blueprint for growth. And in terms of growth, that doesn't necessarily, like if we're working on the town of Holden Beach, but Holden Beach is only an island. But the idea is understanding how they want to function over time. They're not going to have large subdivisions, et cetera, but just understanding the blueprint moving forward and a certain defined time period, 20 to 30 years typically. There is formal guidance in the form of adopted goals and policies that helps the decision-making process for use by both the present and future elected officials and town staff. And the key is, this is guidance. Doesn't mean that it has to be followed to a T. It is not regulatory. It just offers some direction in the decision making process. When Ron's preparing his staff reports, there's references to, hey, the land use plan says X, Y, or Z. This is our direction that the land use plan is telling us. And it may make sense to align with that, or it may not, depending on what the particular request is before. the
And
board.
Wes, I know this
Yes,
isn't,
sir.
isn't an official document, but I would add to that bullet point, potential developers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
The development community also use it. And this is really one of the most critical elements of the land use planning process is an open forum for the public and town officials to propose and implement new goals, policies, and to address emerging issues. So for you guys, assuming that you're going to be the advisory board for this, which I think that you are, assuming of course this is adopted as part of the budget on Monday, you all are the ones that sort of are the gatekeepers for all that public input and
Oh, joy.
and sorting out how that translates into either maintaining policies that we already have, revising ones, and making new ones. And so that's sort of what this is getting at. And one of the primary elements that we get that public engagement from is that community survey, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Why do you want to do a land use plan? Provides an opportunity for self-evaluation, particularly for a community's development, regulatory programs, and ordinances. Allows also for input from various departments and also staff. And of course, you all as the appointed planning board or advisory board and the town council. So as part of this process, we'll also meet with all the department heads and figure out, hey, what are the things that are going to be necessary, you feel like our needs and also wants over the next, whatever it is, 5, 10, 20 years. That doesn't mean that that's going to be turned into a budget request, but at least we've documented it somewhere. And that way council knows maybe what the departments are facing. And then lastly, this is new since this town's plan was updated. All local governments in North Carolina are now required as a prerequisite to retaining their zoning authority to have a land use plan. The statute says that it has to be quote unquote reasonably maintained. No one knows what that means. There's not been any legislation around that or any litigation around that. But typically that means if a community is facing some amount of growth, and you guys probably read this in the Coates Canons, the recommendation is you need to be looking to do update your plan every 5 to 10 years.
Well, can I ask a question? Because I look at that in the land use plan that we have right now. In the land use plan, it stated that the land use plan needed to be revised every 2 years and redone every 7. If we fall short of that, I would reasonably predict that somebody could use that as a means to say, you're not reasonably maintaining, and now we're in the weeds.
Sure. And I think that you're referring to, so the Division of Coastal Management wants us to do what's called an implementation status report every 2 years. That's not binding. I think that's what you're referring to. And then I think there's also language in there. I don't believe that it sort of necessitates, but it says, the guidance is, if possible, try to update this every 5 to 7 years. But it's very hard to do that. MPOs are
So we should adopt the same language saying that we're going to reasonably maintain it.
sure, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Way to go, Ron.
The transportation agencies are required to have a plan done every 5 years. It takes almost 2 years to do it, and as soon as you're done, you got to start again. And so it's really hard to do these things every 5 years if you're doing a full blown evaluation. I mean, listen, we could update the demographics and review the policies, but maybe that's not really relevant if you're not also seeking input from the public, right? And so that's why sometimes it takes a while to get these things updated. Okay. And you'll see there the first item on this for the land use plan components is the public engagement results and input. There will also be demographics, discussion on natural systems and environment, community facilities and services, existing conditions and land use patterns, goals and policies, and of course the future land use map. You know,
So
Yes,
are
sir.
those the components that are required by CAMA, or is this your
Sure.
standard?
that's a great question. So, I mean, generally, a comprehensive land use plan entails these things, and scopes are different depending on community preference. But this would be the fundamental basis of a comprehensive plan. There's other plans. Whoops. Oh, never mind. It was just a glitch. But this would also the proposed plan for you all would encompass all the camera requirements as well.
Okay.
And they modified their rules in 2016 to be more flexible to community needs. There's still things that we have to do, like we're required to do a 30-year population projection. We're required to address certain management topic areas. But I found, at least in our coastal communities, those are all topic areas that folks want to address anyways. So it's not as though we're trying to shoehorn in some camera rules into a plan, that they sort of mold together.
And I'm going to assume that we're looking down at goals and policies, because when I read this, the current land use plan, where I thought it was kind of lacking was there really wasn't an area where a very strong strategic guidance in terms of, okay, this is, so I assume that's in goals and policies. But I just want to make sure. And then the other thing that I see in here, I think one of the issues that we're going to have to address is we are surrounded by a development culture that is very aggressive, and I think we need to have some input in terms of, okay, this is the environment we're going to have to learn how to live in, and how does that impact what we plan to do? Because I think, what I keep coming back to is, how do we absorb all this development that surrounds us without being overwhelmed by it? And unless you can say, okay, well, listen, Brunswick County is getting ready to build 50,000 household plats over the next 10 years, and put that in there so we have some reference points of how we manage our assets in contrast to what surrounds us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that naturally should be addressed.
Okay.
And as part of the plan.
Well, I would see it as almost a separate bullet item.
It would kind of be the external environment.
Of course,
You can go-
Yeah.
Kind of,
Yeah.
Depends how far you want to go, with it. Draw the
Kinda-
circles from county, state,
Sure.
national, but obviously the impacts fade as you go further away, but.
Yeah.
but part of that's in the community profile too, because they can talk about what's going on in Brunswick County, and how many lots are going to be within 10 miles of us, or
Right.
something like that.
To me, the key point
over
is we're not going to develop the plan, isolated from the rest of the world around. We can't do that.
Yeah.
That's right.
We have to be aware of the world around us,
Mhm.
closer,
That's right.
in order to develop a smart plan.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And the community profile is going to address things that are going on in the county, in the region, and Horry County and New Hanover County. And also, that's why
GSATs, et
it's
cetera.
GSAT's critical to talk to the department heads, because they feel the impacts of folks that are driving in here in the summer. And so what are those needs? So
And the commercial development surrounding us. I mean, in the conversations that I have, the conversation almost centered around, well, we don't want Sunset Beach to change. Well, that's great, but the reality is we're going to have to change in response to what's going on around us. And I mean, that is constantly the conversation that I have. And I think that needs to be part of what we lay out so people understand. Yeah,
Now, your order here is not necessarily the order, right?
No. I mean,
Right.
these are just things that are addressed in generally, and then we
Okay.
pull, whatever, we touch on things. I do think also your current plan, you know, is maybe not organized the best. You know, these days I'm really trying
a
to
lot of
work
repetition.
with
Yeah.
communities on, you know, we don't want to have a 10-page document, but we don't need to have a 200-page document for the sake of having a 200-page document.
Right.
And so, because for no other reason than people just won't read it. And
agree.
so, you know, boiling it down, making it have fewer chapters, things like that.
Well, the other thing
can be
too is I found that the strategic components of it were kind of littered in various places.
Yeah.
Like there's a vision plan in section 1.1, then there's, you know, extensive ideas about the future in section 7.
Yeah.
But it's not, you know, to my mind, it ought to be, okay, here's the vision plan, here's the strategic goals, and that ought to be one of the strongest sections and most
Sure.
isolated in terms of we want to state clearly in a one section, this is what we think we ought to be doing and where we're going.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So let's just talk just a little bit about roles and responsibilities. I think you guys are probably familiar with this, but this is just always helpful to kind of go over to make sure everyone's expectations are kind of aligned. As a consultant, you know, it's our job, my job, to help prepare the materials, prepare the document, you type the document, etc., help facilitate the meetings. That means these meetings and also any public meetings that are held, and then serve as a technical advisor. Town staff provides administrative input regarding the land use plan contents, and they offer input on, you know, how is this plan in reality going to be not implanted,
Implemented.
and utilized. I missed that one. So, you know, we
Chat-
may
GPT made that mistake.
correct. Listen. I haven't figured out how to use Chat GPT well enough. My life would probably be a lot easier, but so, you know, we may have a great idea, right? But it's important to sometimes make sure that idea makes sense from an administrative standpoint too, about the realities of how this particular policy may be utilized. And then for you all, you know, while you're the planning board, you are, as of now, proposed to be the advisory committee for this project. And so, you know, you guys are providing feedback and input to staff and the consultants, reviewing the plan materials, of course, providing oversight. Yes,
Is
sir.
Ron too, staff or consultant?
He's sort of both, but he's more so going to be,
He's staff.
yeah, staff.
In this role, you'll be more considered
More,
staff.
Staff.
this role, I'll be more staff. I turned my microphone on, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Good.
So we can tell him things to yell at Wes
Yes.
about.
correct. That's right. Yeah.
My
That's
job-
really what I wanted to know.
Yes. And so, you know, Kevin, you know, most of these guys have worked through some of these things before. A number of these guys were also, when we did the UDO, which was a very heavy lift. This is not as heavy of a lift, but it's a similar iterative process. So yeah, and you know, we want to make sure that the goals, policies, priorities, plan materials, etc., are representative of the citizens and property owners of Sunset Beach. And so that's, you know, certainly you all's perspective, just being appointed members, but also you guys' job is, you know, for us to take in all this feedback and make sure we're crafting a document that aligns with that feedback. Just, you know, briefly, I probably didn't need to share this, but these are just, you know, past experiences in the region of plans that I have participated in and led. As you can see, a number of beach towns, and, you know, also in the region here close by.
And Wilmington is actually now in the process of redoing theirs.
The city of Wilmington.
Yeah. And what county are they in? New Hanover?
New Hanover.
New
Yeah,
Hanover.
New Hanover's redoing theirs as we speak. So the one thing I would simply add to this, and for me, this is one of the critical goals. We spent 2 years rewriting the UDO and made significant improvements in that document that over the long term are going to have a big impact on. Unfortunately, what ended up happening is Logan came in and basically pounded us with statements that were in the land use plan that frankly were in complete opposition to what we'd been doing in the UDO. A lot of what got ultimately approved did not reflect the UDO that we spent 2 years writing. So one of the other goals of this is I want to make sure that this, the UDO is really a tactical application of the strategy. And in some respects, we might have been better if we'd done the land use plan and then the UDO. It's good that we didn't, because now nobody can redo their UDOs because of the North Carolina legislature. But I want to make sure that the land use plan is in lockstep with what we see as the strategic goals of the UDO, so we don't get in a position again where they are not in lockstep and they can be used. Because, Logan made the argument, we as a
Well, but
developer have a right to be able.
But I don't know, lockstep I wouldn't use.
Maybe that's what.
Because I would
In
certainly think
concordance.
through this process, and that I think we will probably come up with things that maybe need to be revised, added to, or in the UDO to make it happen.
Right.
So I will go so far as saying, yes, we don't want to create a land use plan that is diametrically opposite to our current code, and I'm sure that's not going to happen. But and of course, there's always these timing differentials on when something was updated. But
Right.
I would think there may be some things that when we're finished with this process, say we got to look at the UDO and say, if we want the land use plan to work for 5 or 10 or years, we may need to,
Do X, Y, or Z.
look at the code and say, well, we need, just like we talked about last month on parking.
Yep.
If you go back, some of the parking things was actually in that other plan, that first plan, and that see how it happened now, and we may need it. So I just wouldn't go with.
We're in complete agreement here, Ron.
Okay.
Because I think realistically, the land use plan, in terms of residential development, pretty much we're done. Most of the decisions that impact the existing parcels that were available are now pretty much approved. And I think what we're really going to be looking at is commercial development going forward. How do we guide that? Am I out of step here?
Well,
So
we can let him finish that.
yeah, we're almost there. So
Okay.
just looking back on some of the planning processes, and I mentioned this is the Sunset Boulevard Vision Plan, which encompasses the majority of or a large area of undeveloped commercially zoned tract. We went through a pretty arduous process on this to understand kind of what people wanted to see moving forward from a commercial standpoint, particularly as it relates to Sunset Boulevard and down there where the new bridge is.
Right. This doesn't reflect a conditional rezoning application from Riptide, which means there's commercial zoning on the north side of 179 at what used to be Old Courtyard Road.
And Wes, if I could add,
Yes, ma'am.
under GSATs, we are in the process of doing the 904 corridor study, which will go from the intersection here all the way to 17.
Perfect.
So we'll be able to incorporate that into the land use plan as well.
Okay. Thank you.
What does that mean in timing?
6 months.
6 months.
And that includes, because right now, my understanding, there's commercial inventory on the northwest corner across from the Talk of the Town shopping center.
Right. Well,
There's small.
we'll get one of my first questions on this, or to me, tasks on this I'm jumping ahead of my thought process, is an assessment of what is developed,
Sure.
basically spoken for,
Yeah.
versus what's
That-
not spoken for in various different ways.
That
And then, to me, that's what we have to, in the end, that's all that's left to decide on.
Right.
Obviously, it's already spoken, other than some interconnectability things, modal things. But to me, that's like, I know they're already working on a zoning map up to date. And then on my next thought was some overlay on that says, here's what's completely spoken for. I mean, if it's a platted residential, there's no land use planning for it. It's already been land used.
Sure.
But and then what's left, and then try to look at that.
Yeah, and we're almost to the input, but I'll just touch on.
Okay.
I'll just hit one thing along that question. I mean, yes, it's important to understand what's vacant, but you have to understand there is a ton of properties that have been developed, 30, 40 years ago. And my guess is perspective is that those should be redeveloped in their same way. But those are things that are also addressed,
Correct.
in this plan. Just real quick, this is your existing future land use map there. You all are probably familiar with this. And this is, one of the really important parts of the land use plan. This is sort of the zoning map version of the land use plan that provides input on, how development is envisioned to occur within the time horizon of the plan. What type of uses, what type of density, etc.
Now, quick question: with the new downsizing laws,
Downzoning.
downzoning,
Yep.
does that impact what we do with
This.
these kind of land use plan designations?
So that's a really great question. And for a land use plan, really the only regulatory component is the impacts to what are called the CAMA AECs. And so, the short answer is no, not really. But there's some things that we'll just need to make sure that we are not upsetting the apple cart over. I mean, right now, almost all of a large portion of land that's in your areas of environmental concern on the land use plan is identified as a marsh preserve.
Right.
So we're not saying that it can be developed already. So we're probably okay.
Okay.
All right. Okay. So just wanted to provide that basis. Thank you for bearing with me. So, I mean, I just kind of want to go, let's see, it's 12:30. So just go one by one, and we can start with Jerry and, kind of what your thoughts are in terms of what you want to accomplish as part of the land use plan process.
Thank you for calling me on first.
Sorry.
Well, if you want me to go first,
No,
Jerry.
no, up to already.
Get paid by the word. No,
Yeah.
I just thinking, and Wes, thank you so much for coming in.
Sure.
You mentioned about the heavy lifting
Mhm.
of the UDO. How we're you going to attack this, and where it's not so heavy lifting, that we can get it done within one Thursday meeting a month, maybe after, but I would have to yield to town staff to see what works best for them as well. So, yeah, it's just the UDO was very laborious for me. It was tough. So if we could minimize how many times we meet a month, would be great.
So,
I would suspect we're going to need some halfway meetings
and
that focus just on this subject. But again, I don't think it should go.
sure.
It may be more spread out, or there's going to be some points probably where we need more input, and then there's be stretches because.
Yep.
Is there a timetable?
So I've
set?
got, and I do have a hypothetical timeline that's after this, but so this is way different. We had 21 meetings with the planning board.
Yeah.
We are proposing to have 6 with the planning board.
Beautiful.
I mean, there's about 6 chapters of material. If we need more, we need more. But that's, this is very different than the UDO.
You are the expert. You are the expert. I'm a novice when it comes to this, so I am looking towards you to kind of get the meetings. Let's minimize the chatter. Let's get to the points and then get it done.
Okay.
All right.
Perfect.
So
Thank you. That's a great question.
Stuart?
Can we, I mean, the bicycle pedestrian plan hasn't been updated since 2009. I
Mhm.
believe there was a bridge built.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Can we incorporate an update to that into this comprehensive land use plan update?
You could, but really, they need to be separate. I think that we will have emphasis on it in a general sense on the importance of it, and I think that's naturally going to come out. People are going to say we need more bike ped facilities, et cetera. But I mean, I think that one thing that for staff and me, separate of the land use plan, is we need to reach out to NCDOT and see if we can get a grant to do a dedicated bike ped plan. And the matching on that's not bad. I
And
can't.
if I can,
Yeah.
I have already applied for a DA grant through GSAPS to take a multimodal path from the mainland town park to the Calabash River Bridge.
Oh, very cool. Awesome.
Okay.
So we could definitely include a multimodal path from the park to the Regency easily in the land use plan.
Okay.
It's just the other half,
Hmm.
or not half, like a quarter, that involves the county and then Calabash.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's addressed, but I don't think that we would be doing it. The land use plan sort of lives up on a sort of a higher policy document, and then I think part of the land use plan may say, "Hey, let's move forward and work on a dedicated bike ped plan."
Yeah, but could that then drive that, again, here's going to the UDO, that if you have to make the space available, or development to make the space available, like I pick the other side, Logan
Yeah.
has a multi-use path now, just was some, maybe geography did that, but we spent a lot of time making
Right.
sure that path went all the way from the top,
Sure.
was wide enough, and went all the way to the bottom.
Hmm.
Right.
Again, here's where I'd say, if the land use plan says we're going to have some non-motor vehicle,
Hmm. No.
and I don't put e-bikes in there anymore,
Yep.
you know,
So
transportation, and that's the land use plan, and that may then drive things into UDO to, okay, we have to say, if you're going to, part of your open space has to be X amount for non-motorized, what do you want to call this?
Yep.
Other than car path.
Precisely.
Let's call it that for now. In there. So that's what I'm saying. This can drive.
the regulatory requirements.
And the other side of this, in terms of getting grants, it would be extremely helpful if there's a community-driven town document that says, this is what we want. Now you can go to a grant and say, hey, we're ready. Give us some money. So I think it would be that's another aspect of this that would really drive some grant activity and help you all.
Stuart, continue.
So I scanned through the vision plan that you sent.
Mhm.
I haven't had time to,
No, that's fine. I know I sent it yesterday.
and I loved
Yeah.
it. And that's kind of what I would like to see the land use plan look more like that instead of all the, I don't know, it's just repetition of statistics, and it's just, it'll put you to sleep in 10 minutes. But the vision plan for me was really exciting because it talks about aesthetics. So, what is this going to look like? And we really haven't given much guidance, and to say that we took the vision plan, which was a 90-page document that had all kinds of great stuff, and we boiled it down into the Gateway Corridor District that's 5 pages and it just doesn't have any teeth, really. So I'm going to I want to push for more like the vision plan with, what we have now is a land use plan. What you put up there is that you worked on comprehensive land use plans. I want ours to be more comprehensive or more detailed in what we're doing, because we really have less to look at, because not much is going to change residentially. And, can we spend more time working on, the PED access, the transportation issues, and can we look into the future more? Can we do staggered goals and objectives over a 5-year, a 15-year, and a 25-year plan? Because some of this is hard to achieve in 5 years, some of it's hard to achieve in 15, but 25 years from now, we don't know. I mean, maybe they're going to be renting hoverboards at the village and going over to the beach. I don't know. I won't be here, but
So, I think that to your point, the current plan, the organization of it is not great. The thing that we do have to remember, it still is a policy document, so some of it, this
Right.
thing is going to put us to sleep, but it
Right.
doesn't mean it needs to be overly. It does not need to look like your current one. So
And
it
can
it
there
can be.
be two components to it? Can we have a regulatory component and a
Vision
component.
component.
vision or growth plan component that we could hand to people without putting them to sleep with the regulatory?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we
component?
can create a separate executive summary that's boils down the goals and the policies, but I think we can focus more on if like urban design, or the the description of the future land use is more important to you. We can do that, and then if there's things that really the land use plan as part of that large scale public input, the goal is to identify if there's certain things like that. Hey, you know, council or town, we feel like we need to, hire an architect or whoever to go study this area, for example, and figure out, what to do in this particular area. I'd just say this is also part of a discussion, would obviously have budgetary impacts, because the current budget is kind of just, listen, we need to readdress, reevaluate, recreate the plan, a better plan, but it doesn't propose to do bike ped engineering or architectural analysis.
Right.
It will have visioning, though, as it relates to public engagement that's received, if that
Right.
makes
But
sense.
from this process, could we then continue?
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, obviously, we need to get what's done, what's supposed to be done.
Th-
But I always but if we can't go with, I mean, the vision plan there was pretty, obviously, extremely detailed. I was
Yeah.
actually surprised reading that a few things kind of happened. I hadn't seen that before, even though I was involved with some, but so that if our plan is to come up with something like that,
Yeah.
that it can be then,
Yep.
obviously,
The next step is, hey, we got a recommended action. We need to do X, Y, or Z. We
and
need
it
to
could be
study this.
broken. It doesn't have to be. It
Yeah.
could be that, okay, the commercial district or whatever. We need here. The land use plan says this strip, the 904, whatever, is our non-residential business district,
Mm-hmm.
and then our next plan will be what's that to look like, right? You know what I mean? It's like,
Precisely. Yes.
so it's not part of this sort of policy plan, but the
Yeah.
policy that here's what it's going to be, and now you guys need to come up with the next step plan for it.
Exactly. And
And
so,
if there's going to be money involved, then obviously the budget process comes into play then.
exactly. And there'll be, hopefully with this plan, we'll also have recommended actions that will have years tied to them. The goal is to do this, and there should be, I think one thing that this one misses, that can be done better, is at least having a table of all those actions, so that you guys as a planning board can get that once the plan's adopted at the start of the year, and figure out, are these things that we want to work on, or ask council to grant us feedback on working on.
Right. Right.
So I don't have a great answer to your question on that. I would love to do like an urban design plan or separate engineering and bike ped stuff, but it's just kind of a different animal.
Right.
More
but
specific.
I think we need to lay the vision in this,
Yes. Yep.
such that if we don't get it in this, a year from now, when Stuart's sitting here, he can say the new land use plan says we are going to
Sure.
work on this.
You're not really talking about a land use plan is the thing.
Right.
You're talking about a separate planning effort.
Right.
An urban design plan, or, doing an architectural pattern book for commercial, or, whatever it is, or doing a separate, just, hiring specialists that do bike and pedestrian plans, and they do the engineering on the intersection to figure out, hey, this is how potentially this would look. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so.
And-
And just for the record, I'm less concerned about the architectural aesthetics of Sunset Boulevard, because the Gateway District does have architectural standards in there, which is good. I'm more thinking about, where's the sidewalks and where are the tree plantings, because I love that vista as you go down to the the last Sea Trail entrance with the trees overhanging the road and the Spanish moss, and can we recreate that on the other side to some effect? That's what I'm kind of
Okay.
thinking
Yeah.
about.
Sure.
Because as we're drawing people into the bridge, we want it to look like a beach town, not, an urban, streetscape on one side and then beautiful trees on the other side.
No, that type of thing can absolutely be addressed as part of the land use plan, and just describing and providing some example images or whatever about, hey, these are the things that we feel like are important to us.
Okay. And can we steal information out of that vision
Of
plan?
course, yes.
He wrote it. Was
Yeah.
that your senior project in high school?
No.
Because you're obviously so young, and that was written so long ago.
No. It was not.
Because there's some great stuff in there about intersection, pedestrian crossings. There's lots of detail in there that I feel like we could steal some of that and
Sure.
use it as examples of what we want to see.
Yep.
Not if we're not going to get into the specifics until we do another plan, but if we can at least give guidance, this is really what we're looking for, kind of thing.
Wonderful. Our new member, Kevin.
New member,
New member.
Go for it, Kevin.
Kevin.
Well, Stuart took most of my stuff I was going to talk about. Anyhow, the biggest thing, what I'm concerned about is that survey. Make sure we get the town involved and the people. I know we said we did surveys for the last one. I've been here for 15 years. I never knew there was a survey done in Sunset. Probably my fault more than anybody else, but make sure that we get the whole town involved so it's not a after the effect. We're going to do this thing, and the next thing you know, we hear all this clamoring and everything else. Everybody's protesting and complaining. Make sure we have that taken care of. The other thing, and Stuart already talked a little bit about this, is the making sure that this plan is very concise and pinpoint. Because when I was handed this last month, it did put me to sleep a few times. I know it's a lot of, you have to have a certain amount of stuff, but like I said, the vision plan was more enjoyable to read and everything else and goes forward. And my last point is, and my biggest concern is being a homeowner here for years, is our commercial emphasis. We have so many vacant properties between the Circle and Talk of the Town, put it that way. Use that one. How do we get more business in that area versus, everyone's getting in their cars and going down to Calabash and going down to Little River or going someplace else to do their shopping because there's not enough shopping or whatever needs to be in the area. That's my biggest concern.
Great.
Save the best
Richard,
for last.
you're already done, right?
No. I agree with Stuart. I have not had the privilege of reviewing the vision plan, but I've been over the land use plan pretty comprehensively. My background in business development is I wrote master business plans for companies like MasterCard and others. So to me, this is like a master business plan. And it needs to be somewhat visionary. It needs to take into account, where you would like to guide your initiative. I am very concerned about the difference between the potential for what we call string development, which is just development up the thoroughfares, little or no walkability, little or no community sense. We had the good fortune of creating a mud district, okay? And I'm really keen on how can we concentrate commercial development in that area, because I don't think we're going to get any relief in terms of traffic over the next 10 years. So when we develop commercial, we want to minimize the traffic impact. And mixed-use development does that. If you have an area where people can park once and have 2, 3, or 4 commercial interactions where they have to get back in their car, that's a huge lift in terms of what we can accomplish. So I've been pounding the table on this for a while, and I hope in the vision plan, we give strategic guidance that informs what we can then go to a developer and say, hey, in the best of all possible worlds, we'd like you to do this.
Okay.
As opposed to having them show up and say, okay, well, we're ready to build this there. And it's kind of like, oh, well, we say yes or do we say no? So that's the big thing to me, and just providing a strategic overview that is informed by community sentiment and the demographic future that is in store for us. I mean, I do think we have to take a look at, Sunset Beach historically has been the most senior area in Brunswick County. I think that's about to change. The new home buyers I see that surround me are younger, and their needs are going to be very different from the senior retired community that is primarily in Sunset Beach now. And I may be wrong, but I think that's something we need to take a demographic look at going forward. So I'm very encouraged by what you just put up there, and I look forward to moving forward on it.
Mr. Chair.
Couple
Yeah.
points, I guess. Going against the grain here, I'm all for the public input and survey, but I think we need to not rush to that.
Agree.
Because certainly when it's too broad of questioning, too early in the process, everyone's going to answer the questions to be, we want Sunset Beach the same as it was the day before we decided to move here, buy here, acquire here, or build here, right? That's human nature.
Yep.
So I'm all for the public input, but I certainly think we need to assess what we have,
Mhm.
What exists currently, what's available, so that when we go to the public and say, we would like your feelings on commercial strip or whatever, that you got to be specific in your questions, because otherwise you get to always the same, we want less traffic, we want less building, except for my house.
Right.
We
You know,
want free parking.
we want free park. So I mean, it's just human nature. It's not like anybody.
You should be a consultant, Ron. You can come with me to the meetings, the public hearings.
Well, it's just human nature. The day I decided to move here was perfect in my mind, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So anything that changes afterwards has now corrupted my picture a little
Yeah.
bit, right? Don't put seagulls in my painting, right?
Yeah.
So my only point on that to go against the grain is, yes, we need the public input, but I think we need to make sure what we want
Specific.
them to input on, and not just,
Yes.
I agree.
you're right,
General.
not just general,
Yeah.
because then you get.
Yeah.
So,
So I don't know what you're thinking. Maybe you already know this because you've done enough of these. But there's feel a rush in. Let's have a public meeting and send out surveys, and you get. In the end, I'm not sure. Then there's nothing actionable from it. And then later, everybody complains, well, you didn't do what. Well, but because. So I just want to say, let's make sure we be thoughtful and strategic, and as specific as you can be. Obviously, when you do your survey monthly thing and you put but so that you can say, here's the area we're looking at. This is what would you like to see here, A, B, C, D, and
sure.
not as many as just other fill in the blank.
You know
what I'm saying? Right.
And I concur with Ron. I mean, we do need a little bit because, if you go on social media, I mean, most of what you get are what I call the squeaky wheelers. And, and they have valid points, and God bless them. But I don't think they represent the total community sentiment. I was surprised. We did the survey in 2017. 90% of the survey wanted a restaurant. 40% wanted a hotel.
Yep.
Okay. They just did the same thing in Ocean Ridge as part of the HOA. They did a survey. They said, do we want a new amenity center and do we want a new restaurant? They voted for the amenity center. They voted against the restaurant. Guess what? They just finished building their amenity center. So I think it can be a little more constructive.
All I'm saying
hope.
is make sure
But
I think some of the front end work needs to be done first,
Yes.
assessing what we have, what's left, what are the demographics, are these changes occurring? Maybe yes, maybe no, and then say here's the specific questions and input we'd like, so that we can.
Sure.
make that part
And
of it. Right.
so, I that is a great point that you make. And unfortunately, or at least the way that it's typically handled is you guys, like I mentioned before, are kind of the gatekeepers of that input and understanding. Yes, maybe everyone wants a home to never another home never to be built in Sunset Beach, but unfortunately that's not reality. And it's really tough to educate folks about that. I mean,
and that's a great. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I struggle with that in my own personal life. A friend comes up to me, I can't believe they're building X, Y, and Z, and I just listen to them. I don't even tell them, well, there's laws and but I think that you guys are obviously gonna play a role in getting the survey questions and reviewing them before a survey goes out, and then also going to play a role in, hey, we got all this feedback, how's it handled? Well, no one wants to build another thing. That's unfortunate. How do we structure?
But I think, like Richard's example, kind of tells you what I'm kind of. When Ocean Ridge or whatever surveyed, they gave them, I don't know, sound like two choices, maybe three. I don't know how it went. So
we're gonna
you would get a restaurant, an amenity center, or a pool, whatever.
Sure.
And they had to answer that. They did not like. Well, maybe there was none. Maybe the question was none of the above. I don't know. But that's what I'm saying.
We're gonna have
as opposed. Would you like some more recreation?
No.
You know what I mean?
No.
Well, of course, yes. Right.
The goal is we're gonna have
closed-end question.
A couple broad-based questions, generalized topics, but then there are going to be some specific ones about recreation, land use, commercial development. But then we're also going to give the folks an opportunity to just tell us whatever they want in an open-ended question,
Right.
And again, you guys are going to have a chance to review this. But typically, this thing needs to be less than 10 questions or less. Otherwise, nobody's going to
take too long. We're not going to do it.
Sorry.
Yeah, and that's okay. But you said the word education, and I think I spend a fair amount of time on social media, and most of the time I'm instructing people. Hey, yes, in a perfect world, this is what we could do. It's not a perfect world. You're in North Carolina. Here is what we are limited to do. There's development by right. Somebody owns it and they want to build it. There's not a lot we can do. And I think it would be helpful, and maybe I'm being completely idealistic on this, to be part of this process to kind of educate people as to what is it that we can really control, what are the legislative mandates that we have to work under, and give them some guidance. So, I have people, they come in and hair on fire. Well, you guys need to, sponsor a moratorium on development. I'm like, yeah, great. Okay. I'd like a night alone with Stevie Nicks, but it's not going to happen. So anyway, I thought that might be a useful part of this process.
Yeah.
And Ron, if I may,
consider.
The one component that I'm not hearing you bring to the table is the commercial developers and the residential developers.
Yeah.
I think it's very important for you to bring those folks to the table as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
But but I guess would that be separate?
They would be stakeholders, and so if there's sort of stakeholder interviews that we would do selected, just to get folks.
Would we be? Are we?
I will.
On this in this capacity as the advisory committee, and who happens to be the same members of the planning board, can we meet as a group and have a roundtable discussion? Are we under the same meeting laws, even though we're not acting as the planning board at the time?
You are under the same meeting laws because you are acting as the planning board, and you would break into subcommittees to organize a lot of these aspects. And one of those subcommittees could be with.
So we could have like two people talking to the residential
with
developer,
staff,
two people talking to the commercial,
and bringing it back to the group.
So then we need to, that's certainly a good point. We got to do that.
Could we do this kind of on the model of the parking commission?
No, because you're an appointed board. The parking committee was not an appointed board.
Well, then Stu served on it. 2 council members served on it. There were volunteers
Well,
from the
again, 2, we
community.
can always go by 2.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So only 2 of Planning Board Advisory Committee, and then staff, and then obviously Wes or whoever he signs, Ron or whatever. Okay, so we
Well-
need to then somehow, early in the process, figure out how we're going to divvy up the subcommittee work.
Well, and yeah,
Because we did that with the
Saying
Hilton
this,
proposal.
ty-
So we
typic-
could do that with the commercial developers and
Oh,
do 2-ons with
sure.
a staff member and, essentially Carolina Dreams. But
I think that we can figure out how to make sure that we get
Okay.
their input. Usually the consultant is involved in having one-on-ones with them, and we bring that feedback to you all. But I think that there's probably things that we can do, whether we invite folks to a meeting or whatever it is. But we can sort
Okay.
that out.
my initial preference is to have the face-to-face sit down with a subcommittee and then bring the report,
Sure.
then bring this whatever the findings to the whole group then.
I think even official subcommittees of the planning board would be potentially subject to open meeting laws, depending who the membership is and everything. So we have to be careful,
How is
even
the,
with the 2
is the
people.
ERC doing that with like 2 people subcommittees?
I don't know, but if it's an official committee
Well, we
appointed
need
by
to
this board, that's
Make sure we
need
do
to
it.
we need to be careful with.
We need
all
to
of
make
that.
sure we do it right legal, but I think
The key is we're going to get the input,
Yes.
however it happens, whether it's through me bringing back to you, or if some of you are involved in some capacity in participating in those interviews.
yeah, I think this is the devil's in the details
Yeah.
subject. But I think
Okay.
it's something we got to figure out.
we know the intent.
Got it.
Yes, sir.
So, to that point, is there something that the planning board can do to help in all this that's more than what we're talking about, that cuts down your scope of service and maybe saves the town a little bit of money? Or I know Jerry doesn't want to be involved.
Only on rainy days. If it rains, it's okay. He can be involved.
If it's winter,
This is abuse.
I know you guys
Listen,
are high.
Stuart, I'd like to work with you on the subcommittee.
No, I mean, I think that one of the things that's very helpful is making sure that you guys share whatever survey we come up with, and make sure with people are getting that survey done. I think there's other things that we could do related to seeking feedback once we get further along, and bringing that feedback back to the group. So there's things that
so
It
could
can be-
we hold like a community meeting at the gazebo and
maybe
have
that
plans that
we'd have to
and
chat.
people would have to write down comments and we could bring them back to you
Sure.
or something
Yeah, I
like
mean,
that.
What about, can we do it? Well,
It would be better for you to break off into groups.
Yeah.
And if you want to set up a table at the gazebo
Right.
and gather input as people are walking by,
Yeah, that's what
you
I
could
mean.
have some
That's what I'm
visual
thinking.
aid. You absolutely 100% can do that.
Yep. Yeah, I would say, and hard copies of the survey can be available. Tell folks that we're working on, and when we get to the point that we would have a draft future land use map, that could be,
Right.
they're
So-
available, things like that.
This is something that could be coordinated with special events. Is that what I'm hearing? So, like,
Or it
Mark-
doesn't have to be. I mean, the demographics of if you're going to set up at the gazebo on a Wednesday,
Mhm.
you're going to have a different crowd than you are on a Saturday.
right.
So it may be that 2 of you go on Wednesday and 2 of you go on Saturday. And then some of you do the same thing at the park.
Well, like market
You
in
could
the
ask
park.
to set up a table at Food Line, for that matter.
Yeah.
It's
Could we?
the possibilities are unlimited when you're
We-
trying to engage the
I would
public.
guess you are going to be the central depository. You're going to have like a website for collaboration where everything is saved and stored and looked at.
We can have a dedicated town website if we want. Usually what happens is everything is drafted and reviewed here, and when you all are comfortable, the draft material is made available for the public to see. But that's just part of the process, kind of similar to the way the UDO was done, but
Okay.
but in a much simpler process, right? But yes,
And Kimberly can build you a page on the
Yeah.
website.
sure, yeah, that
You
works.
put it
too.
right under the planning board, and
Yep.
you can direct people to go there for all the information that you're doing
Yeah,
That'd be great.
and
and
one
Yeah,
gathering.
Is is the documents that we received today, the vision plan, the other plans that were in here, are they on the website now or no?
There isn't one yet. I mean, that's sort of the question I asked, should we have one?
That could be the very first things that go up on your webpage,
We got-
including a summary of what this process is and why, and
Parks plan
introducing
is
the
on,
people to it
but the
that
others
way.
are not.
Get
Okay.
everything together on one, a land use comp, whatever you want to call it,
Yep.
webpage.
Long range planning documents.
Right,
Yep.
something like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's a great question, Stuart. And the last thing I'll say that, something that you guys can be thinking about, and maybe there's a couple of you that are involved, is, one of you or two of you maybe would be tasked with trying to get business owners to participate in the survey or some type of separate survey, because it's oftentimes hard to get those folks to participate in the process.
Right.
Okay.
We talked about this, I think. Are there other planning processes or efforts that may be needed in addition to the land use plan, small area plans, capital improvements, economic development studies, etc.? I think we talked a little bit about certainly bike ped planning, commercial planning.
Yeah, well, like the vision plan covered Sunset Boulevard, which
Yep.
I loved, but I'd love for it to go all the way to the island
Mm-hmm.
and talk about that as
Okay.
well. Again, when this happened, the bridge had just come in. There was no roundabout. Lots of things. The park has really changed
Yep.
over the years, so a lot of that looks a lot different. So,
And that's why that was done, related to the roundabout coming in specifically. I do think that doing something on the island in terms of a similar streetscape plan or vision plan,
that would be
especially
great.
with new parking, would be something for the town to consider.
Something that springs to mind on this input issue is, would this also include potential staffing? I mean, if we're looking at commercial development, do we invest in an economic development person? I mean, those are issues that may be driven by, okay, if this is what we want, it's not just going to land in our lap. We may have to provide resources for staffing to go out and get it,
Yep.
okay, which is what a lot of towns do.
Mhm.
So anyway, I would think that would be part of what we include. in
Yeah, I
this.
mean that would be definitely something that could be talked about in general terms, and that goes back to some of the department stuff. But if economic development bubbles up as something that's important, that's something that can be included in one of the policies and the considerations for council moving forward. I'll just briefly on this, that was something that was very important to Oak Island. I helped them do their plan in 2014, and economic development was really important. It took almost 10 years, but they've now finally budgeted for a certain line item to have an economic development related person there. So to Stuart's point, we're going to have there'll be a lot of stuff in the land use plan. If some of it gets accomplished, we'll be doing good.
Right.
Right.
That's just a reality, of these, particularly in the short term.
Well, you mentioned small area plans. Could the island be a small area plan?
Absolutely.
And Sunset Boulevard could be a small area plan.
Yep.
Because we don't really have other big areas to talk about. Really.
That's right. Yep.
Most of it's developed. So
Once you have those small area plans, then it's just interconnecting them all,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
That's right.
Either through
Yeah, that's
vehicle or
right.
non-vehicle, right?
Last bullet here, and I think maybe we touched on this, but if anyone wants to add anything else to it, any topics you feel that are most important to address, I think that
Well,
This-
I guess
this
the
has sort
last
of
one
been
I would
mentioned.
stick there is, we are in a wind event area. So resiliency and emergency management and communications. I mean, I think the ERC is part of this now too, or whatever. Too, I think obviously some of the land use plan has to be not land use because we need places for Mother Nature to play.
Yep.
And then places where we want to defend against Mother Nature. So I think certainly, because of where we're at, we'll have to face. I mean, part of our all planning has to be what happens if Hurricane XYZ shows up, what's the best way to handle it? What's the best way to protect
Evacuate.
during it? And then what's the best way to bounce back afterwards? So I think that for us, that has to be in there somehow. Otherwise, I think it would be sort of neglect.
And the ERC was a part of the Resilient Coastal Communities program that we just went through with CAMA, and there were strategic goals and priority listings in those documents that could certainly be incorporated into this one.
Absolutely.
And does that include, because I raised this issue a couple of years ago about cellular tower availability,
Yeah, I don't need it no more.
because that needs to be in here, because
You could
one
get,
of the,
you
and
get a free Starlink now for a year.
yeah, because one of the things that's going to happen, God forbid, if we have a major power outlet, people are going to discover that their access to the cellular network via Wi-Fi goes bye-bye. If there's not enough towers, that phone is a brick.
I do not believe that was included in the RCCP.
It needs to be.
I think we did have communicate. Well, the first pass that we did had a bullet point in for looking at it or preparing for it.
It may have.
Communications, but not as
It
much.
didn't make it down to any
Of course, the
priority
technology's
into
changing
the
so fast. Like that.
projects.
Like right now, I mean, Starlink or whatever the competitor is, obviously is, I'm sure every emergency management committee, group, whatever they're called, is probably looking at that, has that, or gonna have that. And I see now even today, residential, you can get it for the free equipment and you get sign up for a year, you get the little dish for free. So
Yep.
Okay.
Wonderful. Almost done here. Anything else that anyone wants to? Okay.
I have
Jer-
more
Jerry's-
questions, but
Okay.
if you want to get through your
Okay. Just general question. Okay. So I'll just, this is a potential timeline, not set in stone in any sense. You'll see there's not 21 meetings here contemplated. But, assuming this is adopted as part of the budget, there'd be a potential notice to proceed in July. There'd be a kickoff meeting sometime in August. First couple of chapters prepared September through November. Moving into the winter, December through January, looking at community services and then, the plan for the future, like future land use map, things like that. And then hypothetically, the plan already being moved out of the planning board, subject to you all's discretion, early spring. And then, depending on council's review time, a potential adoption by council sometime by next summer, and then sent to Coastal Resources Commission for certification. Two things here. This will serve as a town's CAMA plan. So we are required to send this plan to Division of Coastal Management. I have no control over their timeline. They tell us it's going to be 60 days. Sometimes 60 days turns into 120 days or 180 days.
the last one was 2 years.
Yes. And precisely because of that. And you don't, I've done this enough times that I know what needs to be in the plan. It just takes them, I don't know what they do. I don't know what the black hole is. So sometimes it just sits there. But, for us, it is, whatever we have there somewhere, 6 to 8 months of working through this with the planning board, depending on how things go. I mean, we need to get it right. We need it to align with what you guys want to see, but not 21 meetings. Okay.
Can I just?
Yes, sir.
August is typically kind of a dead month. I know I will not be available in August, so are
Okay.
we? Is that?
This is hypothetical.
Okay.
We got to get through May 5th.
We don't
Then we
even-
got to get a contract, and then
Okay.
and so it's. Listen, I
guess-
don't. The
well-
town is not, from my understanding, we're not saying we have to start tomorrow. So if it starts in September or then we'll just bump things back.
Okay.
Right.
Correct. We just need
Yeah.
to work on our schedule and look
Yeah.
at the planning board load of what's coming down the pipe. Right now, we only have the
assuming the
parking
state doesn't get rid of us.
thing, but, You know,
Mhm.
we're just
The
going to have
state
to be
gets rid of
flexible.
us, somebody else got to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Yes,
Uh,
and we still don't know what the state's going to do
yeah.
with anything. So
Yeah.
there's
So-
always that.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. So yes, just take that into account is placeholders for like how much time this is going to take, whether we get started in July or August or September or
Yeah,
whatever
so-
it is.
So
You're
about-
paying for us like
About a
about
year.
about
Yeah.
an 8 month.
About a year.
For
Yeah.
us, it's about an 8 month process on our end,
Correct.
and
When
then
we
turning it
start.
over to the council.
That's right.
8 or
And
9 months for
That's right.
planning
And-
board.
that's right. And the last council, it took them a long time with this. I don't know if it'll be the same with this council. We don't know, but yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Questions. Thank you all so much for letting me go through that, and I really appreciate your feedback so
Yeah,
far.
no, this
But
has been
it-
great, Wes. Thank you.
Yep.
Well,
Thank
thanks for coming and answering all the questions. So one just quick comment on if we're going to do all these statistics for the new land use plan. Yeah, I've noticed that the parks plan had statistics, the PED plan had statistics, the land use plan has statistics. Can those statistics, if we have to do a follow-up plan to this, can they be used for the follow-up plan without having to
Redo them.
redo all the statistics all over again?
So I
I mean, it's been 12 years since anybody.
they need to
done
be
anything really.
updated, yeah,
Yeah.
and revised. But I mean, I think my hope is that the framework that we'll prepare for this, it'll be shorter, 6 chapters, that you can take this in 5 years and update it more simply than the one
Okay.
that we have,
Right.
and pull from the same data sources and just change the years, etc. I will say quickly on statistics, we're not going to be, the statistics will not be, unfortunately, 2025 data. It lags. So, we'll be going off 2023 data, which I think is still helpful. People that were in the planning process, 2 years ago before COVID, or during COVID, they couldn't really understand the implications of COVID. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the statistics have changed since the plan was updated last. But I do know there's going to be like some new citizens and new building that we're not going to be able to capture because of census data. But we will look at building permits and see what the difference is.
Okay.
I don't know if that answers your
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. All right. So,
And there are outside organizations that can provide statistics for us, and the commercial developers, I'm sure, have
Okay.
statistical data that we could use as well.
just hate to keep working that over and over, but I guess if it lags, then it may be important to get that the next year or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just kind of what I think that you need to update them, and then it's always like I'm working on a plan with the town of Holly Ridge right now. Their population has quadrupled since we did the plan, and their demographics have changed substantially, and their median income as a result of that doubled because of all the new citizens are coming into new homes that are substantially more expensive than historic. Anyway, so it's important.
Big change.
It's a big change. I don't know what the change will be with this, but we'll be able to look back and see what the changes are.
Right. All right. So I have a couple of maybe these questions are for you, maybe they're for Lisa. So I understand that there's a budget amount set. Was that based on the proposal from Wes? Okay. So Wes has already done a proposal with an amount. Have we changed the scope of what you're doing?
So, I mean, I'll say the scope entails, in terms of public engagement, community survey, 2 public meetings facilitated, one more facilitated, one open house schedule. If it needs to be if that needs to be added to, we can discuss.
And a lot of that could depend on the legwork that you all do
Sure.
instead of Wes or Ron or myself.
Yep.
So, we have budgeted for X number, but if you want to hold 10 different community meetings in 10 different places, if you all take that on yourselves, and then we're just dealing with the data of that, then I don't see that being any more expense. But if you want the three of us to organize 10 community meetings and man them and deal with the data, then we're going to have an issue
Right.
on more fronts than money.
Right.
But to answer your question,
Well, I mean, what are we trading, money or time? There's time and money. It can be stretched out. That goes into another fiscal year.
Yep.
If more money, I mean,
sure.
so
And all this would be, like we'll be upfront about, hey, this is beyond the scope of the work, beyond the scope of work, and we can discuss. I will say I've been doing this a long time. It is important to give folks the opportunity to show up in person and participate, but we get most of our participation from that survey. It's just the reality. Folks, they don't, unless we say that the meeting is about a developer is building a 50-story hotel on the island, it's just hard to get people to show up for a land use plan thing because it's abstract. They don't know what this is.
that's what I'm trying to say.
And
You got to be
so-
more.
Yeah.
Free beer?
Yeah.
Free beer.
So-
Free beer tomorrow.
Yeah.
You get a sticker.
Listen, anyway, so that's not to discount and know that it's important. I just, in my experience and knowing how typically it unfolds.
What I sense will happen, we're going to finish this and find out we have more to do or would like to do, and we'll need that repriced afterwards and relooked at in the next budget.
Yeah, this
I believe is probably
Well, like I said, the Parks and Rec consultant that we hired, they had the importance of holding those community meetings off-site. The one we did have in town hall was well attended, but it happened after all of the members had gone and sought out the public in their places, the beach, the park, the shopping centers.
So
Yeah.
I would love if we get a room full of folks or whatever, the vision plan we had. I don't know. I mean, we did a fair amount of outreach on the last land use plan, just no one showed up. And it may have also been a function of when the meeting was held. We'll talk about that though. We'll
Right.
talk about where the location is going to be, what time it is, so on and so forth.
So this is a sticky question, but are we tied to West doing the plan, or is this something we should bid out? Or
Wes, welcome.
That's fine.
I'm just asking the question.
We are,
Yeah.
at this point, we are tied to Wes because we did not go out for an RFP. If
Okay.
you want to go out for an RFP to do this, you're going to back yourselves up by about 4 months. I will say that Ocean Isle Beach did go out for an RFP, and their quote that they ended up accepting was about 20,000 higher than what Wes bid.
Okay. All right.
So which ones are you doing currently?
Which,
I don't know if you're allowed to disclose. Which ones are you doing currently? Or basically in the same time? You have other ones you're working on
Yeah.
at the
Are
same
we
time
gonna
periods?
overload you, or?
No, we're working in Carolina Shores and Holly Ridge at the moment, and finishing up one for Pender County. So
Carolina Shores would be the most closest to us.
yep, we've started that one. I think we have almost 800 responses to their community survey already, and that one
Wow.
just went live last week.
Well, that's great.
So
Well, I just asking the question.
And so you can, if you want, I'll say that, I think that it's the reason why Ocean Eye, I know if you go out on the street, it's typically going to be almost double what we've done. And I understand, like, Wes has been here working a while. Maybe there needs to be someone else that looks at it, but it's
Well,
certainly
on-
up to you
We
guys.
got-
On the flip side, you've been here and you know a lot about what's going on in the town, and we're kind of at the end of the county, so it's not like, a lot of consultants come down here and do a bunch of work. So,
Yeah, and then the last thing I'll say is, like, this is things that I know how to do. I'm not here just because it's convenient for Wes to do. There's no one in the state that's done more coastal land use plans than me. Period.
Right.
That's active. So,
And we're under contract with the COG already and have been
right.
for the 15 plus years that I've been here.
Well, I guess what brought up my question was that somebody else did the Parks and Rec plan.
Mhm.
Does COG not do that kind of stuff, or
I
is it?
see that's a perfect example. I could have put in my hat and said I'll help the town do that, but I don't. I think I'd be doing a disservice to the town, right? I've done Parks and Rec plans in the past, but I offer better expertise to town if I'm doing a land use plan for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we spin this plan off into another, kind of plan
Yep.
that involves the pedestrian and bicycle plan, is that something you're comfortable with?
I would
working?
I would help put together a grant in whatever capacity, but really that's another consultant that needs to do the bike ped plan. If someone wants to be involved in doing another separate vision plan, I could participate in that and help them, but
Bike and ped plans are more geared towards Park and Rec consultants than land
Okay.
use and vision.
there's a number of consultants that's all they do.
I guess the
Bike
key
ped
thing, like we
plans.
said before, I think we need, if we're going to end up going that way, is make sure we have the statistics we need in there, that we laid the groundwork for it in this,
Yep.
Right.
that can then feed. Right. If this is Wes's expertise, it's another company or consult, that what's in this plan can be pulled out and then taken to the next step. Not
That's
like,
correct.
well, we got to start from a blank piece of paper because know,
That's what I was kind of
I
getting
want to
at
make
is-
sure we're laying the foundation, let's call it.
Yep.
That if
Right.
we decide to go parks
Mhm.
or extra modal, that the information is here that can be drawn out, expanded on, and then the detail done.
That's right. Yep.
This should be in my mind, our goal.
Right. And
Yeah,
I've
I
done
agree.
bike ped plans in the past too. But again, I'm more of an expert in doing a land use plan, development ordinances, understanding how they work together. Obviously, also doing current planning, with Ron, and how this document plays a role in the functioning of the town.
Right.
So.
Right.
Anything more? I got one.
And then, how often do we, during this process, would we have to update the council on what we're doing, or do they not care until we just present them the plan?
I would
or-
probably give them a mid round update.
Mhm.
But I mean, you guys can tell the council what we're doing anytime you want.
And it would be included in my town administrator report that I will give monthly.
Okay.
Just don't tell them, man. Yeah. Way over budget. You done? I have one.
I'm done.
We talked about earlier GSAT and 904. I guess a big question or a big concern is traffic all the time. I think we missed a boat on, but anyway. So in this part, how would that come into play here? I mean, do we have interfacing with NC DOT on this to see? Because
Yeah.
obviously we're looking at our own. Obviously, I just experienced the most wonderful thing in my life is the bridge got open.
Yeah.
So I've been just driving up and back just for the fun of it. So I mean, it's like
And Kevin too.
I just realized that
You
one
too,
little
riding up
thing,
the bridge back and forth.
one thing, was a tremendous impact on
Yep.
the whole area. So how, bringing in
So
the NC DOT type transportation.
yes, we'll look at existing traffic counts, any future capital improvement plans that are contemplated through GSATs or DOT, and then we'll also look at, hey, what is potentially our population going to be in 30 years? What does that mean for transportation, et cetera? And what are some big picture ideas or things that we can think about may be necessary that
Right.
we know are things that DOT should be aware of?
I mean, because if they want to put a circle at 904 in Georgetown, it's going to be the reverse of the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's going to have to go to. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
huge impact on the town for that will be 2
And
years again.
So,
And those are the things that the 904 corridor study will bring out.
You said that's
DOT
probably
will be
6
heavy in
months
that
so
study.
that'll be done like the end of this year.
Mhm.
Well, the other issue too is we're still waiting for the Carolina bypass Route 31 decision, and that's also going to have an impact.
Well, that
Because-
ties into 904 probably, right?
And that's in the GSATs as well.
In the 904,
No,
I didn't. Okay, because
it's just a
they're going to make a
separate
decision.
component of the GSATs.
Yeah, because they're going to make a decision in terms of how far up they're going to cannibalize Route 17, and where that happens
Who
is
was
going to have big
John, did you
impact.
say that, John?
John Corbett and Pete Larkin are the council members, and I'm the staff.
And we'll cover those larger projects as well.
Okay.
We're not doing engineering, but just for the sake of understanding how it impacts future land use, they will be taken into account.
Okay.
Okay.
It's a lot to consider.
And thank you all. I don't often like to toot my own horn, so apologize for
That's fine.
No,
but
I appreciate
you know,
that you
Toot
did.
away.
I'm not just here because it's convenient for me to be. So and that still doesn't mean that you have to hire me, but I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you,
Wes.
Wes.
No, we appreciate it, Wes.
Yeah, we
Thank you.
appreciate it. I have no doubts. I'm just asking the question
Sure.
so the public
Yeah.
could know that, hey, where did all this come from? And
Okay. All right.
That
I
counts.
appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
No, we agreed to have public
Public.
comment period.
Oh, we did. Sorry.
So,
But before-
seeing that we have some, wait a minute.
Well, I need to leave because I told you I had to leave at 1:30 to go coach the team and drive the team bus.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I will have to go because if not, we'll have 25 middle school kids waiting for someone to drive the
Okay.
bus to the game.
Well, just know Kevin had to depart at
Goodness
1:30,
gracious.
1:33. Thanks, Kevin.
No problem.
I don't think
Thank
it's
you.
going to be much longer. Any
Sorry
public
about that.
period for public or sure? Come on. Riptide's not building us a multimodal path through Sea Trail to
Sir?
Oyster Bay through Colony 2 to Ocean Harbor? No? Okay. Sir? State your name, address, and 3 minutes for comments.
You got it. So Brad Way, 7610 High Market Street, Sunset Beach. First off, I'd like to thank you guys for the opportunity to speak here. Richard, I know you and I have not always agreed very much, but I do really appreciate you standing up and asking for participation from the community. So thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
What I want to share a little bit is because I don't have exposure to y'all's process. I don't know how you've done this in the past. And so I want to better understand that. But my past years of career has been all about developing strategic plans for businesses, whether they be nonprofit or profit. And one of the things I have a concern about just starting off is I feel like we're putting the cart before the horse. I have yet to really understand what Sunset Beach's vision is for the future. I feel like you guys are developing a land plan without the council or the mayor or whoever decides it says this is where we want to be in a simple statement in the next 5 to 10 years. And I'd like to know what that is. I would encourage you all to think about developing a strategic plan, not only for land use. Land use should be part of that overall plan, how we achieve that vision. So I would really like to encourage you all to maybe push it back up to the council a little bit and say, what is our vision for this town? Where are we heading? Richard, you've heard a lot of it from me. I'm one of those people. I want the old school stuff, but I believe there's an and to it. I believe you can keep Sunset Beach the way it used to be when you bought your house 17 years ago, when I bought mine 17 years ago, and still advance to the future. It's not a one or the other. There's an and in strategy, and I think you guys are selling yourselves short. So what I'm hoping you would consider is just a simple process where you establish your city or town's vision, where we want to head, and then understand through some simple strategic tools such as SWOT analysis, pest analysis, what's your strengths, what's your weaknesses, what's the political environment that Sunset Beach is up against, and understand those challenges before you start running off and making a plan for what the community needs to look like. And not only do that, but hold yourself accountable to getting stuff done. A strategic plan for 5 to 7 years, to me, scares me to death. I know that's the way to do it, but you have to have some short-term measurements in the next 12 months to show that you're making progress, or you're just going to sit around and do nothing. And so what I would encourage you to do is follow a common strategic process, develop some strategic initiatives. You know, we want to do this for land, we want to do this for law enforcement, whatever you want to do. And then what you guys play the part in is what can you accomplish? And I think you brought up the economic development group. Dang straight. Why are we letting it happen to us? Let's get in front of it and bring people to this town. They want to be here, but we could control who comes here, I think, a little bit better than what we're doing. And so I really want to encourage you guys to think about that.
Time.
And is on that time already? Well, I'd like to close with this, if I can. So I do have a simple vision for this town, and I think it has the end statement. Sunset Beach will be a town that reflects the values of the past and preserves the small town beach appeal that draws so many of you all and I to this area, while preparing for the future with sustainable and manageable growth through welcoming those who desire to maintain our natural charm. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Brad.
Thank you.
Okay, barring no further public comment period, we'll need a motion to adjourn our meeting.
I so move.
Anybody second?
Second.
Jerry can't wait.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
No nays? Meeting's adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.